Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hey everybody, it's David, Mike, and Greg with episode 149 of the Near Memo. And hello, yes. And we're going to be talking today about the Bright Local Review Study, the big smorgasbord of updates that Google just did, algorithmic spam, helpful content updates, and their impact, and then our research on the local finder and the user behavior that we've uncovered there. And we're going to kick it off with David talking about this week's plethora of Google updates and what's going on with them. So David,
Sure.
what's happening?
Yeah, well, so this was apparently the March core update, just a regular old monthly update from Google, but based on the volume and frequency of SEO chatter, seems like this was maybe a more impactful core update than most months. Google identified 3 specific areas that they were targeting with this particular update. The first was what they called scaled content, largely AI-driven content, theoretically. The second was something they called site reputation abuse, which as I read it, I didn't really understand what it was, and then what it was trying to get at. And then I saw Aleda Soli's post on LinkedIn, sort of what the SEO annotated versions of each of these was. And this is parasite SEO. So basically trying to get an article placed on a website you think would rank very well for the keyword you're trying to target. And that site publishing that article. So they're trying to cut down on that kind of behavior. And then expired domain abuse was the last one in terms of the 3 major buckets of abuse they were targeting. I guess I'll start from the last one first, which is, the expired domain strategy has been around since the earliest days of Google. And if it's really taken them 20 plus years to figure this out, that is truly pathetic on the part of Google search quality engineers. So they say that they're looking at, essentially, is a domain producing radically different content on a radically different topic? Like, was it a medical domain previously, and now it's publishing casino-related content, that kind of thing. So that seems to me to be something that Google should be able to do fairly easily, even if they're just looking at the Wayback Machine to see what was on the site before versus what's on there today. That I certainly believe that they will enforce and have good success enforcing. The second one is on site reputation abuse, parasite SEO. I think that they're probably getting better at doing that in terms of all of the semantic related algorithm updates they've had with BERT and Mihm and all of these things in terms of understanding the match between a query and a piece of content. So I feel like they can probably understand the match between a single piece of content and broadly what the website is about. So that makes sense to me that they can probably dial up that algorithmic filter pretty easily. The last one I feel like is total fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Google trying to seed fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the SEO community about its ability to detect and crack down on AI content. I personally, and related to a topic we'll talk about in the Bright Local Review Study, first of all, the ability for for a human or an algorithm to detect AI content, I think, is pretty limited. Secondly, consumers in some cases actually prefer the AI generated version. And so I would argue that and to Google's credit, they have not said explicitly that AI content is bad. But clearly when a site is producing, thousands or millions of articles of AI generated content that Google deems to be low quality, in air quotes, they will potentially take action. I guess I would say that I would still continue. I don't think that I don't know that any algorithm will ever get to 100% perfection at being able to detect AI content. And frankly, if you're producing such low quality AI content today and publishing it on your website that it's obvious to Google or it's obvious to a human being, you probably shouldn't be doing that in the first place. But if you're using AI, if you're just feeding a bunch of topics that your users are interested in, or your potential users are interested in, that you're hoping to attract, you're just feeding those topics into an AI widget and curating and editing the response and curating the response and publishing on your site, like to me, that is a absolute best practice for marketing in the year 2024. And I think Google's going to have a hard time detecting that stuff, and B, even if they're able to detect it, theoretically would not violate the helpful content dictum that they put out a couple of months ago. So
Well,
I
I
would
mean,
say
it's
that that first one is in my mind, again, more fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, hey, we reserve the right to take action if you're doing this, but again, I'm very skeptical of their ability to do it, or even the rationale behind doing it.
well, it raises in my mind an interesting question between their actual capacity to enforce things and their desire to scare people into self-enforcement, right? I mean, I think the parasite SEO thing, um, and maybe the scaled content thing also is really, they've got their algorithm, and then they've got this army of SEOs who are paying very close attention to everything they say, some of whom are observing their rules and some of whom aren't. But I wonder to what extent that sort of secondary line of defense is really their enforcement mechanism in some of these cases. Like, we're going to tell people that they're going to get punished if they do X, Y, or Z. So in the hope that they will stop doing it so that the algorithm doesn't have to do the enforcement. I wonder if there's a psychology there going on to some degree.
I think you're absolutely right. And in a totally unrelated story, Mike King presented a great presentation at PubCon this week titled something like "All the Times Google's Lied to Us Over the Last 20 Years." And so I think that this, at least for me, this first bullet point of the March core update falls in the Google is lying to us, or at least not being entirely truthful. It's not outright lying.
So two things about that, Greg. One is, and David, one is they simultaneously apparently did a bunch of manual penalties, right? So it's going to be very difficult for people to know, is this an algorithmic or manual penalty, which certainly increases the fear level amongst those people that are broadly exploiting the system. In local, this is largely irrelevant because most people just want a 6 or 7 or 10 or 20-page site, and they put the content up and they forget about it. This is largely irrelevant in local. But the issue one is that they did this manual penalty simultaneously. And issue two is they're talking about this being so big and complicated, taking a full month to roll out. So we don't even know what the impact is. In other words, if it's going to take a full month to roll out and we've seen the first couple of days of it, we don't even know what we've seen yet, right? So there's a lot of, both of those points reinforce your FUD theory on Google controlling behavior through innuendo, not so much lying, but less than honest comments about what reality is and what they really want. And in the end, though, I have to wonder, it's like, I get that there may be an economic model for cheating Google and there may be some monetary gain, but how is that? It's like such bullshit. It's like, why does anybody spend their time doing it? It's like, is that a way to live a life? It's like, to me, that's such a,
Well,
and a lot of this conversation just reinforces that sort of BS.
Well, Mike, I would push back on a couple of those points. I do think this matters in local quite a bit, not so much
multi-location.
Exactly, not so much for mom and pop business with
maybe
20 pages
maybe
of content,
lawyers,
but a major directory site or a media publisher, that wants to.
Yeah, I was referring to SMB websites.
Markets. I feel like there's plenty of companies that are already trying this, and in my opinion, again, should keep on trying it, assuming that there are quality filters in place for the initial output of the AI tool.
Well, what about local? What about local landing pages? That are auto-generated that have certain characteristics on them.
Yeah, those rank everywhere. I mean, frankly,
Right.
We saw that in legal. There's a particular. I'm not going to out them here, but there's a very well-known national law firm that's been around for 25 years that is executing this strategy to perfection. And I would be surprised if they weren't doing something with AI to help generate all of these local landing pages. So,
yeah, I was mostly referring to small business websites, not these legal behemoths with 1,000 pages.
Right.
I think
and the
legal
second thing
is
I'd say
suspect.
The second thing I would say, Mike, is like I think that it's not so much. Well, I do think there's a tremendous opportunity for the single programmer who knows his or her way around chatbots to create these sites that rank for a year, make a lot of money, and then, get smacked down. Like there is certainly that persona out there. But I do think that there's plenty of companies that are dependent on eyeballs for their own business model, whether that's display advertising or affiliate marketing or whatever, that are legitimate companies that have been around for years and years and years, where this actually is a meaningful lever in their revenue strategy. And so I don't think it's just the sort of
they can't find a more
types that are doing this.
They can't find a more meaningful lever, like providing useful content to their users.
But again, here's what I dispute. This is what I dispute. I think AI content can absolutely be useful for users, and some cases, users prefer it. So
yeah, but I'm not saying AI content is what is at fault here. I don't even think it's what Google doesn't even appear to be going after it. They're going after.
Well, they say this policy was originally designed. Quoting from the exact blog post, this policy was originally designed to address instances of content being generated at scale where it was clear that automation was involved.
Right, but that's a very vague statement. That doesn't say all AI content at scale. It says, it's vague in the way Google is vague. So what is, we don't know what it means.
But that's, you could argue that what David has just read for certain kinds of national brands or multi-location brands is a best practice, right? You want to create some scalable system to generate the kinds of content that you need across different geographies or locations. And so, are they saying that you can't create pages with automation? I guess Google would push back and say, well, if it's not helpful, or if it's thin, or if it's, if it's low quality or whatever.
Right. My argument is that bots are getting way better at actually producing high quality, helpful content. And so the automation factor in my mind is a total red herring. And again, even if Google can detect it, I think it's a total red herring.
I would agree it's a red herring. But there is, one assumes and hopes that Google is going after abusive sites that just churn out lame, repetitive content, right? But I don't know what that means for a lawyer.
This brings us to sort of the final issue, I think, in this part of the discussion, which is, to what extent is Google sort of responding to negative press coverage and criticism in the market? There was that Wired article a few weeks ago, and I can't remember the individual's name. He was, buying expired domains and then populating them with AI content. Many of them sort of news or tech blogs, things that had been pretty well respected in the past. And he was making a bunch of money, I guess, off ad impressions or affiliate links. And, when I saw this, I immediately thought of that. I thought, I wonder if Google is responding to that, because that got a lot of exposure and play, or that kind of thing that article represents, and the visibility of that kind of behavior, which is sort of another instance of Google kind of reacting to criticism in the media, or criticism, sort of out in the market in how it's responding to things.
And this is how their spam filter has worked in local since day one. They basically will only act on something once it becomes a story in a significant enough global media publication. And so now we see that strategy expanding to organic because it's worked so well for them in local.
But then they don't even really fix the core problem. They fix the visibility of the problem only temporarily.
Yep.
Google creates these bizarre economic arbitrage opportunities, perhaps knowingly, perhaps not. And then this sole programmer goes out and figures he's going to make a year's worth of income or whatever.
Well, those are the incentives. Those are the incentives, right?
Yeah.
It's rational. It's rational behavior.
It is rational behavior in capitalism. I guess the question is, what does that mean for us?
It's not necessarily ethical, but it's rational. But
yeah. Well, ethics have no place in capitalism. It's an amoral system.
Yes,
it's strictly focused on self-interest, and Google generates all these opportunities for creative guys like this. But
the Google repeated throughout the various blog posts and discussions of the changes that they were implementing, the core update and spam update. If you're doing something primarily to rank, if it's designed for search engines, the dirty secret is that every piece of content that's created today is designed for search engines, right? That's the primary objective of content on the web, unless you're some hobbyist who, doesn't really care, right? But if you're a commercial enterprise, if you're trying to make money in any way, if you're trying to sell anything in any way, your primary objective is to create content to rank. And the SEOs that fan out and represent Google's sort of extended workforce advise that to their clients. You're going to follow this best practice. You're going to structure content in this way. You're going to write about these things for the purpose of getting exposure in Google, because it's a marketing tool for your business. There's a certain kind of weird naivete about Google's kind of the dichotomy between write content for people and write content for search engines. And yes, it does manifest in different ways, but I just thought everything is created to rank, pretty much, that has any kind of commercial intent.
And to Mike King's credit, I think the very first example of Google lying to us over the last 15 years was Matt Cutts saying, just create great content for users and you'll be just fine. So,
well, and you're not going to be fine if you're somebody
you're not at all.
If you're somebody who's really a thoughtful, knowledgeable person about a topic and you're just writing about that topic, maybe there's an off chance that you might rank for the right keyword. But unless you've created the content in a certain way and structured it and done the tagging and done the title tags and all of that, you're not going to rank. Google will simply not reward that.
Well, I don't mind nuking news articles that don't get ranked, but I'll be damned if any of my analysis articles. I'm going to hang on to my Blumenthal's website, because I don't care how far back those articles go. And I don't care.
It's an art. Zero. It's your brain. It's like it's your memory. Externalized.
So some of this is just it points out how much power Google has in our society.
Too much.
Which is too much, right? That they've accumulated economic power and drive social behavior as a result, and it's too much power. And it distorts things. Terrible.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.